We have to raise here one disgusting aspect of practicing the art of the novel. That is that some of us do it for a living. In other words, there is a commercial factor that comes into it. There's nothing particularly ignoble about earning one's living by putting words together. As a matter of fact, it's very difficult to do that. I don't pride myself on anything I've done in the field of fiction or anything else. I do pride myself unequivocally on having earned a living through manipulating words for the last 25 years. Very few people could do it. It involves very hard work. It involves a certain amount of selling out. I've always said, and I say again, that I will write anything for money except pornography and political propaganda. But there is a sense of willingness to pander, willingness to forego the high vocation for the sake of money, which you do not find in the poet. The poet knows he's not going to make money unless he's John Betjeman. But the real poet regards his art as a vocation which is not related in any way to the profit motive. The novel is in a different situation. I think it's a situation which does not even encompass the playwrights. There are many excellent playwrights who have written plays which have not been produced. Their talent is known, their reputation is fixed. The plays do not get on the stage because the theatre is a medium which is merciless. You can't start invoking aesthetic laws about the drama. If a play works, it works. And this came up recently when my own version of Cyrano de Bergerac was put on at the Barbican Theatre by the Royal Shakespeare Company. The Times Literary Supplement produced an article which said, why doesn't the Royal Shakespeare Company do plays which are really valuable instead of nonsense like this? That's not a judgment that can be made, because nonsense, if it works in the theatre, is good nonsense. You have to fill a theatre. Perhaps the situation does not arise quite in the same way with a novel. It does not arise at all with the poet. But in practicing the craft of the novel, one has to keep some kind of eye on the commercial factor. Our late lamented colleague, a fine novelist, B.S. Johnson, Brian Johnson, as you remember, cut his wrists in a bath, rather like Seneca, in absolute despair, because he regarded the novel as a serious form close to the poem, in which experimentation was the lifeblood of the form. Unfortunately, his experiments, admirable as they were not commercially successful. People would not accept the notion that the novel was still capable of functioning in the manner of Laurence Sterne. And Brian, in despair, killed himself. Most of us have to compromise. Whether this is shameful or not, I don't know. James Joyce did not have to compromise because he had a patron or patroness, Harriet Shaw Weaver. He was a man who was prepared to borrow money and not pay his debts. Most of us, brought up in the British bourgeois tradition, want to produce fiction which will just about sell and just about pay the rent. That is the situation in which I find myself. We have behind us and before us all the time the example of the greatest commercial writer of all time, that is William Shakespeare, who, as far as we can tell, had comparatively few aesthetic ambitions, not like his friend Ben Jonson, who was prepared to publish his works, the works of Ben Jonson. Shakespeare, of course, did not publish his works. They were published after his death by a couple of fellow players. He merely wanted to be a gentleman, to own land, and to have his private pew in the Stratford Parish Church. Shakespeare is a curious instance of a man who produced an elitist kind of art, while at the same time pretending to produce a popular kind of art. This is something that we're not capable of achieving in our own day, but it's something I'd dearly love to do. To be able to produce a popular novel with a huge readership, which was really playing a quite different game, which only the intellectuals could appreciate, is probably the end to which we all aspire, but cannot encompass. The time is not opportune. This is not an age in which we can do that kind of thing, but that was Shakespeare's great achievement. But when we think of how Hamlet was probably produced, there was a revival at the Rose Playhouse just across the road from the Globe in 1601, I think was the year, of the Spanish Tragedy by Thomas Kyd. Ben Jonson had written additional dialogue. The thing was doing well. It was packing them in, so probably Burbage said to Shakespeare, Will, they're doing Thomas Kyd. Can we dig up something else of Thomas Kyd? So they dug up Hamlet Revenge, a play that's now been lost, and Shakespeare rewrote Hamlet Revenge fairly rapidly, and I think was put on. Now this, to my mind, is a key point in the history of literature. Here we had a revenge tragedy which became the most intellectual, the most philosophical, the most metaphysical drama of all time. A play upon which millions of words have been expended, a play which we still don't fully understand, which nevertheless functioned as popular drama. If only we could do that, if only indeed somebody like Freddie Forsyth could produce, or Ian Fleming, or his avatar, could produce a novel which seems to be working solely on the popular level, but in actual fact is working quite differently. It's a matter, I think, of sneaking in. We sometimes see with popular films, as you say, made in the 30s, made 40s and 50s, a straightforward narrative in which the art director, or the director himself, has managed to sneak in some symbolic element which is missed, intended to be missed by the bulk of the audience, but is picked up by a very small select percentage. Probably this is the only way in which we can reconcile the high calling of our own art and the low desire of the average person merely to be entertained. I would say this, I think our job is, as novelists, to entertain. I think that our primary purpose is to divert. And I don't think that the term divert need necessarily have a pejorative meaning. To divert means to push somebody off the main path for a moment. I think the term is still used in traffic regulations, diversions. You divert a person from the main treadmill of daily living to give them a chance to look from the outside at what life is like. And in this sense, of course, Hamlet is a diversion, it's the divertissement. The term is not a lowly term. Our job is to divert in that sense, to push people away from the daily path, the daily treadmill, and look at life from a new dimension, from a new angle. If we can do that, we're probably fulfilling our job. Other jobs to do as well. I mean, no practising novelist can be sure of what he's doing. I can only be sure of my immediate motives for writing. The fact is I have to write because there's nothing else I can do. I have to earn a living, I have to pay the rent, I have to buy the groceries. I think we need critics to tell us, I say that again, we need critics to tell us what we're doing. I don't think it's our job as novelists to do more than the job of novelizing. I think ultimately we should be writing novels which contain both elements. Back to Hamlet again, if you like. If I'm allowed to say this, I would say that there's a terrible problem with the British novel at the moment. I say with some diffidence, I've lived abroad for the last 15 years. Snide newspaper columnists will naturally say this is to evade tax. No novelist evades tax. You pay tax in whatever country you publish. You can't get away from the tax man. The reason why I went to live abroad, although I was quite happy living in London, was because I feared that the British novel was becoming too parochial. And I still think this is true. The great vice of the British novel is that it's London-based. But it's true of novels by, well, various women writers, I will not mention by name. It's as though the adulterous affair in Primrose Hill or Hampstead is a central event of contemporary history. I've been reading some of the novels by a very, very bright young novelist named A.N. Wilson recently, in which I note references to television personalities whom I don't know. I don't know who Terry Wogan is. I've heard the name vaguely. I don't know what he is. I don't know who Anna Ford is. I know what she looks like. We are, I think, you are, people living in England, practising the novel in English, are in great, great danger of becoming too parochial. This is, I think, a specifically 20th century fault. I think it began, if I may say this, with Virginia Woolf, to regard one's own milieu as the centre of the world. This was not true of Balzac, this was not true of Dickens, this was not true of Tolstoy. The novel is a bigger form than the British practitioner is allowing it to be.